Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's broadcast. This is Tap Into the Truth, and with you as always, I am your ever so humble host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. And I am joining you today as it is April 15th. Here in the United States, that of course is the last day you have available to file your federal income taxes without paying a penalty. And on a day like today, you can't help but reflect and wonder exactly what it is that you're paying for. If you are somebody that actually does have to pay in, and believe it or not, a majority of Americans actually do not pay in. They get more back than they actually pay in many cases. Doesn't that make a lot of sense? We face the question marks for those of us who are paying, despite the fact that the ones who are paying are constantly told over and over again that they're not paying their fair share. Even though tons of Americans aren't paying anything at all, you have to wonder, what value are you getting? What is it exactly that you know for a fact that you're receiving? Is there anything? Is it worthwhile? We get scandal. We get complete inability to make anything happen efficiently. We get a wide variety of completely useless waste of time. I don't know. I don't see the value. Now, obviously, we've got to have the government. The government needs money to operate, and obviously, we've got to fund it somehow. But again, on a day like today, you can't help but wonder, what's the point? What is the true value? Just something to think about. In the meanwhile, we'll go ahead and we will start talking about today's stories. There's a few things kind of all over the place, a little bit, quite honestly, as there is a wide variety of storylines that I have to kind of follow. They're all worth mentioning. They're all big deals for one reason or another, but they seem completely unrelated. And the first one is probably the most important one. I came across this story on Judicial Watch. That is a wonderful website that is keeping a close eye on corruption across America. They started, as you would imagine, being Judicial Watch by watching things going on in the courtroom and how that wasn't exactly working out the way most people would expect. This, however, is not a judicial story. It is one that would be most judicious, however, for us to pay close attention to. This is a big one. And the reason it's a big one is because it is something that's near and dear to the hearts of a lot of conservatives as far as keeping a close eye on our borders. And if you've been paying attention for any amount of time, then you're well aware of the fact that most conservatives have been saying the reason we need to do this stems from the fact that it's a national security risk. And it is. How do we know it is now? Listen to this. An ISIS camp has been discovered just a few miles from Texas. This, according to Mexican authorities. This was on Judicial Watch on April 14th. Just a few short days ago. Guess what? Actually, that was just yesterday. ISIS is operating the camp just miles from El Paso, Texas, according to Judicial Watch sources that include the Mexican Army, field grade officers, and Mexican federal police inspectors. The exact location where the terrorist group has established its base is around 8 miles from the U.S. border in an area that is known as Anapara. That's situated just a little bit west of the area also known as Chichoad? Anyway, the bottom line is it's close to El Paso, Texas. My pronunciation, forgive it. At any rate, another ISIS cell to the west of that location in Portos Palmas targets the New Mexico towns of Columbus and Deming for easy access to the United States. The same knowledgeable sources confirmed. Okay, now do you have that? 2, not 1, 2 ISIS training camps. One of them close to New Mexico, one of them close to El Paso, Texas. Now, during the course of the joint operations last week, Mexican Army and federal law enforcement officers discovered documents in Arabic as well as plans of Fort Bliss, which is the sprawling military installation that houses the U.S. Army's 1st Armored Division. They discovered Muslim prayer rugs, along with documents while they were looking around during this operation where they raided these facilities. Now, law enforcement and intelligence sources report that the area around there is dominated primarily by drug cartels and gangs known as Barrio Azteca. Now, the cartel controls part of that area, and it's really what makes it so dangerous and a hostile operating environment for the Mexican Army and the federal police. Now, according to the same sources, coyotes engaged in human trafficking and human smuggling are working in that area as well. These coyotes are actually helping to move ISIS terrorists through the desert and across the border between their side of the border and an area known as Sunland Park in New Mexico. Now, to the east of El Paso, cartel-backed coyotes are also smuggling ISIS terrorists through the very porous borders close to Fort Hancock, another southwestern town in Texas. These specific areas were targeted for exploitation by ISIS because of their understaffed municipal and county police forces and the relatively safe havens that these areas provide for the unchecked large-scale drug smuggling that was already going on. Mexican intelligence sources also reported that ISIS intends to exploit the railways and airport facilities in that vicinity as well. The sources also say that ISIS has spotters located in East Paleto, which are the mountains around New Mexico, largely managed by the Bureau of Land Management. And these folks are in place to assist with terrorist border crossing operations. ISIS is conducting reconnaissance of regional universities and White Sands Missile Range, government facilities, and, of course, Fort Bliss, not to mention the electrical power facilities in and around several New Mexico cities. Now, that's big, ladies and gentlemen. That is huge, and this has been documented now. So, kudos to Judicial Watch for stepping outside of their normal area. I did reach out to Judicial Watch, and they didn't have the personnel to come on. I was going to have somebody come on this upcoming Sunday show and talk about this and talk a little bit about Judicial Watch itself. But if you're interested in them, I highly recommend you check out their website. It's www.judicialwatch.org. Feel free to check out their blog areas. You can check out a lot of other great information. And if after you check them out and you decide you kind of like them, they have areas on their website where you can make contributions to them. And I highly recommend, if you've got the money to spare and you're interested in making any contribution, I believe these folks are a worthwhile opportunity to do so. I would recommend it. But let's get back to the point of the story. And the point of this story is plain and clear. We have a very open, porous border to the south. We've known this for a long time. We have had multiple administrations now that have refused to do anything about that. Their rationale has always been either I'm afraid to be branded a racist, or if they're on the liberal side of the spectrum, they're motivated because they want to get more people in here that they can make many promises to, and in exchange for those promises, hope to get them to vote illegally in our elections. That is the deal. free labor or next to free labor, fear of being branded a racist, or far more insidious, just looking for an opportunity to take advantage of people that ordinarily would probably be very conservative by nature, and that is the Hispanic community. Because they're family-oriented. Most of them are very strict Roman Catholic religious. These are not people that ordinarily would align themselves with the Democratic Party, but they do so when they get here because they're under the false impression that the National Democratic Party wants to help them in some fashion, which of course they don't. They want to use them, much as they want to use any and everybody else that does anything on their behalf. But this is huge. 2 verified, documented ISIS training camps just to the south of our national border, with intended targets in both New Mexico and in Texas. Something you're not hearing the mainstream media report about, something that you can find if you dig deep enough. Right now, speaking out of fear to keep their jobs, but still doing so because it's the right thing, Border Patrol agents are coming forward to certain individuals hoping that they will get the story out. They're coming forward with the story that we are seeing the largest number of what they refer to as other than Mexican, OTM, illegal crossings of our border. Large numbers of people that are identified as either being Syrian or Iranian or Iraqi. In fact, there was a case just, I believe it was 2 weeks ago. There was a case roughly about 2 weeks ago where they picked up an Iraqi national whom they were able to verify had traveled and trained under the Russian military. So the Iraqi military training wasn't enough. Got Russian training, and then was crossing our border illegally to the south, and was on his way to Baltimore, Maryland. And then shortly after this much gets documented, the paperwork's filed, they're doing their due diligence, suddenly they lose track of where this individual is. Nobody knows where he's at. He obviously must have been released because he certainly didn't fight his way out. This individual had to have been released. But they don't know where he is. So my guess is by now he's in Baltimore, Maryland. How is this happening? It's happening because way too many people are too afraid to call a spade a spade. Too many people are afraid to speak up and say what is obvious truth, what is necessary to be spoken, and that is these are dangerous times. And there is nothing racist about saying you want the border controlled. There is nothing racist about saying that we have to control our borders. Because now we know the bad guys are over there. Although there's some serious question marks as to whether or not the current occupier of the White House thinks that ISIS really is the bad guys. I mean, publicly he said they were the JV. This was well before they made strides to initiate what is shaping to be quite the impressive caliphate. A group of people that now have sworn that they